Hello, and welcome back to Anatomy of the Cigar, a weekly or bi-weekly video series where we talk about all things cigar. In this episode, it's all about Connecticut wrappers. And just like the last episode, which was about Maduros, we're going to talk about more than just how they look and taste. We're going to talk a lot about the history of the leaf and where it comes from. Now, while this isn't my favorite wrapper type, I can absolutely appreciate where it comes from and the impact that it's had on our industry here in the US, and the fact that it's one of the more popular cigar wrappers out there. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. Before we go any further, however, I would really like to say thank you for all the feedback that we got on the first episode. I'm going to do my best to implement those changes, some of which I can and can't do. A lot of it just has to do with the fact that I have to film in my garage and I've got a crappy sheet as a backdrop. So sorry about that. I'm recording all this on my phone and I'm not using a computer to edit it. It's just purely on my phone and stuff like that. So I will do what I can to improve these videos and improve my diction, because let's be honest, it kind of sucks. As I get more comfortable with these, they will get better. Either way, appreciate all the feedback, and I'll be sure to do what I can to really make these videos a lot better for your enjoyment and for mine. Thanks. So, Connecticut wrappers. What are they? What are they all about? Let's get into it. They're pretty much a staple in the cigar industry today, worldwide, not just in America. Talk to any cigar smoker out there that's been smoking cigars for more than a day, and he or she has heard of the Connecticut wrapper. And I guarantee you that you watching this, you probably know it too. It's prized as one of the go-to cigars for beginners. They're easy to light, they're easy to keep lit, they're easy to smoke. They have a mild flavor profile, even though the flavors can be pretty stand out and easy to pick out, which makes it, again, easier for beginners to really kind of develop their palate and not get lost in the nuances of flavor identification. And chances are it won't burn out your palate if you're not, smoking it like a smokestack at an iron factory. So, like I was just saying, being that it's a really set it and forget it kind of cigar, the Connecticut wrapper is generally a pretty good place for a newbie to start. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a strong cigar. That has, again, like I said in the first episode, that has a lot to do with the filler and binder combination. But the wrapper leaf itself is not very strong. It can be, depending on how it's grown and what priming off the plant they use and so on and so forth. But generally, they're generally pretty mild and pretty low in strength as far as the wrapper leaf itself is concerned. So, while the color range of this leaf is not as big, it's not as big of a spectrum as some of the other wrappers are, like Maduros out there. There's like 4 or 5 different shades of Maduro. There's not really many different shades of Connecticut wrappers. They're anywhere from a light tan to kind of a solid brown color. Any lighter than that and you're getting into the Claro or the Candela range, and any darker and you're talking Colorado Maduro or a darker Sumatra or something like that. So not too much in the way as far as shades concerned, but I will say that the Connecticut stands out in one aspect, and that's the fact that it is soft. It's very fine grained, and it's been described as being buttery or like a supple leather. So it's very soft to the touch. There's 0 to no tooth at all. It's also a very, very thin leaf, so it can be pretty fragile. So if you drop a Connecticut, or if it goes through some rough shipping, or if you don't store it properly, the wrapper leaf itself can be pretty fragile and it can crack pretty easy. So you'll definitely want to be careful whenever you're storing these or transporting these, and really don't want to drop them. You don't want to drop any cigar, but especially not one of these, because it can definitely bust open on you. So while the Connecticut is pretty one-dimensional when it comes to shade and feel, that doesn't necessarily mean it's one-dimensional as far as flavor is concerned. Anybody that lights up a Connecticut cigar can be in store for generally, cedars, woods, creams, some peppers, and other notes that some people with more experienced palates pick out. But generally, cedars, woods, peppers, and creams are the heavy hitters as far as the flavors are concerned, and that's good because they're generally pretty mild flavors, but easy to distinguish. So again, like I've said before, perfect for the new person. If you give a new guy or girl a heavier cigar, it could probably burn out their palate. It could even make them sick, you know, if it's just too much. So generally, one of these is the way to go for someone that's new, being that they're so mild and creamy. I specifically enjoy them in the morning. I don't get a chance to smoke in the morning very often, but when I do, definitely like to try and find a good Connecticut. So, while the Connecticut wrapper and the Connecticut broadleaf itself is pretty simple as far as shade and flavor profile and all that stuff's concerned, its history, next to, I'd say only next to, you know, actual Cubans, it has one of the richest histories out there, and it's a history that is wholly American in origin. Sure, I know that there's very few Connecticut leaves grown in the US still. Most of them are outsourced, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But as far as the original Connecticut wrappers, that's an American history story. So let's get into it and see how this leaf really came to exist. Alright, so as we get into this part of the video, I'm going to do my best not to sound like a robot and to not just read from the script, but I do have some facts that I need to list, and I want to make sure that I'm getting those facts accurate. So if you see me kind of looking down my script or whatever, I apologize for that. But anywho, let's get into it. Where did the Connecticut come from? Well, the Connecticut River Valley was settled by the English, and they founded the town of Windsor in the year of 1633. So while the local population, or the natives that were already there, were growing tobacco, it really wasn't huge. There was, you know, a few plants here and there. It was just for personal use within the small tribe. When the English settled, they got a hold of it. It really brought the tobacco industry to bear in the US back then. So it only took the town of Windsor 7 years to become the center of tobacco production in the US. Back then, the main type of tobacco that they were growing was a Virginia shoestring style tobacco, and this was mainly for pipe smoking. So pipe smoking was the most popular form of smoking tobacco in the US back then, not just from the native populace, but also from the settlers that came from other countries. So it was so popular that by 1640 there was over, 34,000 acres devoted just to tobacco production for sale and for personal use in the Connecticut River Valley. So that's pretty big. So from 1633 to 1640, it went from just little personal use plots by the native population up to 34,000 acres. It would take the cigar a long time to catch up to the pipe as far as popularity was concerned. It wouldn't be until the Civil War era that the cigar really became a more popular way to smoke tobacco. And by then, we were producing and exporting over 10 million pounds of tobacco a year, just from the US. Not to mention all the other foreign markets that produced back then and still produce today. So it wasn't until, the 1820s. The 1820s is when the Connecticut wrapper started seeing its introduction to being used for a cigar wrapper. Before then, all the broadleaf tobacco that came out of the Connecticut River Valley was being used for binder and filler purposes. And most of that wasn't even in the US, it was in, like I said, the European markets. So, throughout the 1800s, the growers in America, and not just the Connecticut River Valley, but everywhere the tobacco was grown in America, they were concentrating more on the Sumatra leaf and the Havana seed leaves. And that was mainly to try and keep up with the ever-growing Cuban market that was becoming more popular in the US and over in Europe. So really had to do something different, something that was gonna set us apart from everybody else and kind of give us an edge, because the growers and tobacco industry as a whole in the US knew that we weren't the only ones in the market. So, being in tune with the mindset and the time of America back then, we wanted to do our own thing. So through decades and decades of experimentation and trial and error and getting together with other scientists and farmers from the region, they really put their heads together and came up with a process that produced what we know today as the Connecticut shade leaf tobacco. And that is what produces the cigar wrappers that we love so much today. So 1900 is the year that the first shade tent was put up in the town of Windsor. And under those tents was growing the first Connecticut shade leaves that we see and know today. And over the next 20 years, it started to develop a pretty decent following, but nothing like we see in the US or even in the foreign markets as of current year. It would take something else that would really give it that boost that it needed. And it wasn't until Prohibition. Prohibition is what really gave the tobacco industry in America the boost it needed to, be a world player. We're Americans, and damn it, we need our vices still to this day. So take away alcohol, well, we're just going to dive right into tobacco, and sure enough, they did. So the 13 years that Prohibition went on really gave the tobacco industry as a whole in the US just a huge boost and allowed it to grow to where it is now. And being that people during Prohibition couldn't have their suds and all they could do was smoke some leaf, the Connecticut wrapper really started getting more popular. So by the end of Prohibition, there was over 20,000 acres of shaded land just for the Connecticut shade leaf. So that on top of the 30-some thousand that was already around for the pipe tobacco, and then however many other thousands of acres they put out there for cigar tobacco, there was an additional 20,000 acres just for this particular wrapper leaf. Unfortunately, however, today, it's not that big. In fact, there's only just over 2,000 acres dedicated to actual Connecticut shade leaf. The fact that it was cheaper and easier and the soil quality was just as good in other countries, big companies started going over there to grow the tobacco, and while it's still a Connecticut wrapper and a Connecticut leaf, it's not a true Connecticut Valley shade wrapper leaf. But there's still 2,000 acres out there, or just over 2,000 acres being grown, and there's still some companies that pay dearly to get that specific tobacco. Companies like Davidoff, they still use actual Connecticut shade leaf on some of their more popular Connecticut wrapped cigars. So, and even though a lot of the Connecticut wrappers that we get today aren't grown in the US, you can get a pretty similar experience and a pretty similar taste profile and smoking experience overall from those leaves. Well, I just want to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching it just as much as I enjoyed making it for you. Be sure to keep an eye out for the next episode in this mini-series about cigar wrappers, and in that series we're going to look at the Habano, the Corojo, and the Sumatras. Those are the three other pretty popular wrappers in the US and worldwide, of course. And that next episode is going to be the last episode in this cigar wrappers deep dive mini-series in the anatomy of the cigar. After that, I want to do something a little different, and I'm going to put it to you guys to decide what it's going to be, like a brand history, something like that. So, if you want to see a brand history video, what brand do you want to see? It could be any brand out there. If not, I can also do something like the evolution of the cigar cutter. That's something else that I've been pretty interested in since I started smoking cigars, since there are so many different types of cigar cutter out there. So get down in the comments, let me know which one you want to see. Brand history, evolution of cigar cutters, cast your vote now. I also want to know what your favorite Connecticut wrapped cigar is. Tell me what it is, why you like to smoke it. And again, just like the last video, if I left out any other Connecticut wrap facts that you think is interesting and awesome, also get down there in the comments and put them out there. Let's have some more discussion about this. Thanks everybody, and remember, puff on, misfits.